What's up everybody, D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing another Godzilla X Kong The New Empire discussion video. That's right, in this one we're going to be doing something that nobody ever wanted or asked for, and by that I mean, today I will be ranking all of the characters in Godzilla X Kong The New Empire. Not the Titans, the characters. Not Kong, not Godzilla. While they are characters, I'm counting them as Titans. Just the human cast. So let's do it. So I know what you're thinking, like, why? Why am I doing this? I really liked the human cast of The New Empire. I thought that all of the characters were really solid. I didn't think they had nearly enough to do, but I thought they were all really solid. I would have liked to spend more time with the human cast in this movie because for once a MonsterVerse movie had limited its cast to a bearable amount of characters where we truly could get to know them, and a lot of them were returning from the last movie, so it felt like we could build upon these characters and expand upon them in ways that the MonsterVerse really is like allergic to doing for the most part. I wish there was more consistency within the MonsterVerse human casts. I liked the cast of King of the Monsters a lot. I know Kong Skull Island's cast can't really return, but that's my favorite. And I thought that GVK's cast had a lot of potential. While I personally really like Nathan Lind and he's not back, I'm glad to see the characters that are back, and the characters that aren't back is fine with me. I think Mark and Madison Russell definitely ran their course between GVK and King of the Monsters, and I don't really think that there was a lot for them to do in this movie, so I don't need them back. It's actually a lot of the side characters in King of the Monsters that I want back, like Dr. Chen, Dr. Ling. I like Rick Stanton. There's some of those characters I want back. Barnes I want back. G-Team, some of those guys. In this case, I'm glad that the characters we got returned. And I want to spend some time talking about it because I really do think the actors all do a really good job in this movie, and I don't think they're getting enough appreciation, so I want to share some appreciation for what I think is a lot of really decent performances. And because to me, what makes these movies work the best is the human appeal. It's always the way that humans respond to the monsters or the way monsters respond to humans. That's what's interesting to me. While I really like GXK, a lot of the movie is just a superhero movie without the dialogue. It's Kong around Hollow Earth where there's absolutely no sense of scale. It's no different than Planet of the Apes, except the only difference between that and Planet of the Apes is that these apes don't do sign language. And while I really appreciate the visual storytelling and I like that kind of cinematic language and I liked Kong as a character and I like seeing all that stuff go on in the movie, they don't feel like monsters to me. They feel like just animals. You really lose the thing that brings me to these films in the first place, and that's the monstrous element. That monstrous element can only be gained through interactions with the human world, which is why for me that battle in Rio was amazing but too short. That was the only moment in the movie when Scar King felt monstrous. I love stuff like that. I love when the monsters get to fight in a city or when they get to interact with humans in any way. And so I want to spend some time talking about the human element of this movie because I really liked it and I want more of that moving forward. I do not subscribe to the belief that we need to continue to limit the human screen time. I think we just need to use them better. There's really only 7 characters in this movie, and unfortunately for him, by far the lowest of those is number 7, Mikael. Mikael was played by Alex Ferns. He's played very well. He's got a strong personality and I do like him. I just don't think he served much of a purpose in this movie. He's the heave pilot. In fact, I don't even think there's any footage of him in any of the trailers. Mikael just kind of shows up. He's grumpy. I like some of his dialogue. I like that remark where he's like, who would want to kill the Titans and make money doing it? Well, that'd be a horrible thing. And then he dies, and he dies in a really unearned, dumb way. Not only is it kind of a reused story beat from Kong Skull Island, having a tree come to life and then kill a guy. It's like a mix between the Spore Mantis and also the Mother Longlegs, but also it just felt wildly unnecessary. Like, had Trapper not slowed them down, they could have just walked past that tree and Mikael would have survived. He was just there to add some cannon fodder to this movie, and I don't love that. He didn't do anything for me. It didn't make Hollow Earth feel more dangerous because that was the only danger they encountered down there. All it did was just serve to be a big scare moment, I guess. Number 6 is Miss Hampton. Miss Hampton is the new director of Monarch. She's played by Rachel House, and I actually think she's pretty solid. The only reason I rank her so low is just because I'm confused about who she is. They call her the director, so does that mean she's in the new position that Sarazawa was in? Whatever happened to Mark Russell? Because in GVK, he was the director of Monarch, or are there multiple Monarch directors, which I believe is the case? Whatever happened to characters from Monarch Legacy of Monsters? What about Verdugo? I don't understand why those characters wouldn't be here, other than that obviously at the time they were working on this movie, they were also working on that show, so they maybe didn't know where she's gonna wind up. It's just those kind of questions that make me be like, Who is she? Where did she come from? Why would she not be Mark Russell? Or what is Mark up to? Or like, who is she? I never really got a sense of who she is. And she seems to not be totally in the know, because while she gives orders to Ilene, she also needs Ilene to tell her what to do when Godzilla shows up. So while I liked her, I just felt like she didn't do a ton in this movie, but I appreciated her presence. I did think most of her dialogue was a lot of fun. I like when she calls Godzilla a big angry baby. Number 5 is the Iwi Queen. I really like the idea of the Iwi Queen, and I like a lot of the performance. She's played by Fala Chen. There's nothing against her, I just don't love the look. I personally feel like, I don't know if it's just because they're Hollow Earth natives, or if it's because they wanted them to feel a little more magical rather than real, but to me, these Iwi felt a little out of place. They didn't feel believably like they live in the most dangerous world of all. Like, they live in the Hollow Earth. They didn't have the character that the Iwi from Kong Skull Island had, and I feel like that's most on display here with Fala Chen. Her character is just a little too normal. It was my issue with it. She didn't feel distant. She didn't feel mythical. She felt a little too normal. The Iwi in Kong Skull Island not only were actually played by Vietnamese farmers who were like weathered by the sun and had this beautiful age to them, but also there was this real mysticism about them, about the way they moved and the way they interacted. And I don't love making the Iwi telepathic. I just think that kind of takes away from them. So I think Chen does a good job in this movie. I miss the mysticism that the Iwi had in Kong Skull Island. Number 4, I'm kind of surprised he's this low on the list because I really liked him, but there's really not many characters in this movie, so where else could he go? And that's our boy Bernie Hayes. I love that they toned down the conspiracy theory angle of Bernie. While he still has some of his conspiracies, he's a lot more of just like this nerdy podcaster kaiju groupie like Newton from Pacific Rim, and that's where this character really excels. To some degree, I feel like he's a little toned up in the first act. He's a little much to handle in the first 30 minutes of this movie. He's just too big at times, but they really balance the character out over the course of this movie, and Brian Tyree Henry is a wonderful actor. He can deliver dialogue that most other people can't, and he can deliver it in a way that is so charming that it works. You just allow him to say those lines. He's really wholesome and charming and likable. He just is such a nice guy. I loved a lot of the line deliveries too. They felt incredibly natural. One of my favorite moments is when he's all excited that he's actually going to Hollow Earth and he's kind of annoying the people on the cabin with him. There's just a lot of little moments with him where I really like the way Brian Tyree Henry delivers those lines. I think they're all really well done. Another character who I think does a super good job delivering lines that shouldn't work is Ilene Andrews, played by Rebecca Hall. Rebecca Hall's Ilene Andrews was one of my favorite characters in Godzilla vs. Kong, and so I'm really glad to have her back for this movie and to have that motherly role that she has with Gia expanded upon. I really love that. And I think her motherly dynamic with Gia is the strongest emotional core in this movie, even more than Kong and Suko. That moment where Gia tells Ilene at the end of the movie, "You are my home," it is so well done, it's so well delivered, and Rebecca Hall's reaction to it, it's so natural, the way she kind of breaks and stutters on her words. It's so beautiful. A lot of her dialogue in this movie is delivered with this real earnestness that feels real, despite the fact that the dialogue itself is really ridiculous and campy. Rebecca Hall has a way of selling a lot of these incredibly obvious exposition dumps in ways that don't feel overly forced or annoying. It's pretty impressive. And I like the way that she kind of stumbles on some of her lines occasionally. It just feels really natural. It's definitely an intentional choice from the actress, and she pulls it off incredibly well. Number 2, the shock of all shocks is that she's not number 1, is Gia. Gia is my favorite character in Godzilla vs. Kong and quickly became one of my favorite characters in the entirety of the MonsterVerse. I just thought she was so wonderful in that movie, and I think she's underutilized in this film. Her bond with Kong was the strongest part of that character, and they didn't play it up in this movie. She only has 2 or 3 moments with Kong through the entire movie. She tells Kong his new tooth looks nice, and then later in the movie she does a finger touch with Kong when he's sad. The two characters don't interact enough, and so you lose a lot of the heart of that character, but they gave her more importance in this movie than she ever had, because now she's the one to summon Mothra. Although I don't understand how that plot mechanism works, it gives Gia a lot more importance, and it's cool to see her have stuff to do. I like that Gia gets to help out a little more. I like that Gia has that moment where she can unite Godzilla, Kong, and Mothra together. That is a fantastic moment. And overall, I just really like the way that Kaylee plays Gia. Kaylee Hoddle plays Gia. Obviously, really hard role to play because not only is Kaylee a child, but also she's playing in this really fantastical world. But she really sells a lot of not only the human moments, but also the fantastical moments. She really sells the connection to Kong, despite the fact that Kaylee's acting against nothing. And one of my favorite little moments in this entire movie is this tiny little moment towards the very start where Gia uses Andrew's words against her, and then when Andrews is like, okay, fine, you can come to Hollow Earth, Kaylee does this little like, yeah, kind of thing. It's just really cute. It's well done. It feels very natural. I like that they've evolved Gia. She's not just this innocent islander anymore. She's got a bit more of this teenage angst, but she's not an overly angsty teen, which I was a little worried about going into this. I don't want them to play that angle up. I like that Gia is still just a sweet, wholesome character. She just has a little more agency of her own, and I thought she was really great in this movie. And that leaves number one, a character which from the ads alone, I was like, this guy sucks. I don't like him. I don't know why. I just was strongly against him, and that's Trapper. Dan Stevens is Trapper. I guess because when they cast Dan Stevens, I expected a character with a lot more edge, because the only role I've seen Dan Stevens in is Adam Wingard's other film, The Guest, where he is incredibly weird. He plays this super charismatic, purely charming guy, but also is deeply disturbed and pretty sinister and kind of evil, and he sells both of those extremes incredibly well. And so it makes sense that he would be able to sell this super charming, wholesome, just goofy dude, but I was a little nervous going into it because we lost the edge with the character. And you know what? I'm glad, because seeing the way that they portrayed Trapper as this pure-hearted, nice guy who's just kind, he's just in touch with the world, and he's okay with his place in nature and reality, it was a real nice breath of fresh air against Bernie, who's a little more like, I can't believe this is happening. The way those two characters balanced each other out, that their dynamic together, it was so awesome. Trapper I just thought was such a good guy. He's the kind of guy who I would like to spend time with in real life, just because he's the kind of guy that you would feel good being around. It's clear that that's the kind of guy who makes everybody's day better, and it's all because Dan Stevens just oozes charisma. He's just so charming in everything he does. They make Trapper, a character who should be kind of cringe, work really well, which is again one of Adam Wingard's biggest strengths, taking things that I don't think should work on paper and pulling them off in a way that it just works. It just does. Trapper singing I Gotcha while he's about to take Kong's tooth out, it really shouldn't work. It sounds too over the top and ridiculous, but the way Dan Stevens plays it, the way it's portrayed in the film, it just feels like that's just who this guy is, and he's just here to have a good time. Not that he can't take things seriously, thank God. Thank God he wasn't like overly childish, but it's just that he's a guy who's just a little more at peace with not only his mortality, but the world as a whole, and I thought that was really great. I really liked that character. I thought he added a ton to this movie, and so I wanted to shout all of the actors out. All of the actors do a good job. There's not a single character in this movie, even Mikael, my number 7. I still thought that the actor did a good job. I think the character's fun. It's just a matter of giving them more to do. And Trapper was a character that I felt like he had just enough to do. He got to have his big hero moments. He got to have some small character moments. I really liked it. One of my favorite moments in the entire movie is that little interaction between him and Bernie, where he's like, what are you going to do with that footage? Do you really think releasing that footage is going to be good? Do you think that'll have a positive impact on the people down here? It was just this really nice moment. It called back to Kong Skull Island in the way they didn't want to release footage about Skull Island or release any word of Skull Island because they knew it would ruin what the islanders and the island had going for it. It's stuff like that that I really like in the MonsterVerse, and I like that this character got to be the embodiment of that for this movie. But what do you guys think? Rank your favorite characters down below. I'd love to hear what you guys thought of all these characters from Godzilla X Kong. Which were your favorite human characters? Of course, I'll talk about the Titans in a different video, but I wanted to spend some time talking about the human characters because they need some more credit. Alright, as always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. I really appreciate the support I get on the Patreon. It is through the support of the patrons that I'm able to continue to make videos like this for you guys, so if you want to support the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys next time for the next one. D-Man, out.